The night had been long and uneventful. Until the pounding began, I was 30 seconds from locking the clinic door when someone started hitting it. Not knocking but pounding, the kind of desperate guttural sound that makes every instinct scream run. My hand froze on the deadbolt. Through the frosted glass, I could just make out a shape. Tall. Swaying. The pounding came again, weaker this time, followed by a sound that stopped my breath, a raw animal groan. "We're closed," I called out, hating how my voice shook. "Hospital's 15 miles north. Please." The word came muffled through the door. "They'll find me there." Before we begin, if you believe love can be both salvation and destruction, make sure to subscribe. It's free and it helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. Something in his voice, desperation that wasn't performance but survival, cut through my caution. I stood there, torn between my medical training and common sense. This was rural Oregon. 10:45 on a Tuesday night. I was alone. Still that voice. That plea. Against logic, I turned the deadbolt and opened the door. The man almost collapsed into me. Caught him barely. My 130 pounds were no match for his frame. At least 6'3", built like he'd spent his life in a gym. Blood soaked through his white dress shirt, spreading dark and thick. Hey, easy," I said, dragging him inside. He stumbled forward. One hand clamped to his left shoulder where crimson bloomed like a grotesque flower. His other hand gripped the exam table, knuckles white with effort. Up close, I saw the details panic had missed. The shirt wasn't just expensive, it was custom. The pants were tailored to perfection despite being splattered with mud and blood. Even his shoes screamed money. Italian leather, ruined by whatever hell he'd walked through to reach my door. "Sit," I ordered, already moving toward the supply cabinet. "Don't pass out yet. I need information first." "Bullet," he said through gritted teeth. "Left shoulder. Through and through, I think." I froze with my hands on the antibiotic bottles. "You think? Hard to check when you're running." His eyes met mine for the first time, ice blue, startling against his dark hair and the blood. "You're a doctor?" "Veterinarian," I replied, setting supplies on the tray with hands that had steadied the moment I switched into professional mode. "Which means you're technically my first human patient. So if you have a preference on anesthesia, now's the time to speak up." Something that might have been a laugh escaped him. "You're joking. Humor helps me not panic." I cut away his shirt with surgical scissors, revealing the wound beneath. Entry point in the front, exit in the back. Clean through the meat of his shoulder, missing bone and major vessels. Lucky. Incredibly lucky. "This is going to hurt," I warned. "Everything already hurts." I believed him. Up close, I could see other injuries. Bruising along his ribs, scrapes on his knuckles, a cut above his eyebrow that had already stopped bleeding. This man had been through a war tonight. "What's your name?" I asked, irrigating the wound with saline. He hissed but didn't pull away. "Does it matter? I'm about to fish around inside your shoulder with veterinary equipment." "Yeah, it matters." "Raphael." He watched my hands with an intensity that should have been unnerving but wasn't. It was grounding, as though he trusted me. "Just Raphael?" "Just Raphael." "Valentina," I said, meeting his eyes. "Dr. Valentina Cruz. But you can skip the title, since I'm practicing medicine without a license right now." I injected local anesthetic around the wound. "This will help a little. Tell me about the people looking for you. The less you know, the safer you are." "The man bleeding all over my exam table doesn't get to make that call," I said sharply that I began suturing. Each stitch precise despite the racing of my heart. "Someone shot you." "Multiple someones, judging by how paranoid you are." He was silent for a long moment, then finally said, Business associates. A disagreement that got violent. Business associates don't usually settle disagreements with bullets. Mine do. The simplicity of his honesty sent ice down my spine. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. Whatever Raphael was, whatever he'd done, he was still a patient, still a person bleeding in front of me. When Thor's barking erupted from the back room, my heart leapt. My German shepherd, 80 pounds of muscle and loyalty, charged into the doorway, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Raphael's reaction was instantaneous. His right hand shot toward his waistband, his body twisting away from the threat. The motion tore at my sutures, blood welling up again. "Stop!" I commanded, pressing gauze against the wound. "Thor, sit." The dog's growl cut off mid-sound. He sat, but his eyes never left Raphael. Raphael's hand fell away from whatever weapon he'd been reaching for, but his whole body trembled with tension. "Your guard dog, my friend," he said quietly, voice strained. "You're going to have to breathe through this," I told him. "I need to restart the suture, and it's going to hurt worse the second time." But Thor had already made his decision. The shepherd rose, padded forward, and pressed his nose against Raphael's knee. Then, shockingly, he lay down at the man's feet. "He's never." I stopped mid-sentence, watching my dog settle like he'd found something worth protecting. "He doesn't trust people. It took him 3 months to let me touch him after I rescued him from a fighting ring." Raphael's trembling hand slowly reached out, and Thor allowed it. Let this stranger scratch behind his ears. "Smart dog," Raphael murmured. "Terrible judge of character, apparently." I almost laughed. Almost thought I finished suturing in silence. 23 stitches. Not my finest work, but it would hold. As I bandaged the wound, my fingers brushed skin too warm, fever, shock. "You need antibiotics," I said, calculating my limited stock. "And rest. And probably a real hospital. But I'm guessing that's not happening." "Can't." He tried to stand, swayed dangerously. Caught him again. For a moment we were too close, close enough to smell cedar and blood and danger. "You can't go anywhere," I said firmly. "It's almost 11. Where exactly are you planning to go?" "Before they come looking," he murmured, glancing toward the dark windows. "If they come looking, they'll find an empty clinic, and a lot of questions. If you stay, I can claim you're my cousin from out of state, injured in a hiking accident," I said quickly, already planning. "You'd lie for me?" "I'd lie to keep armed men from shooting up my clinic." I pointed toward the door leading to my small apartment. "There's a couch. 7 hours until my assistant gets here at 6. That gives you time to rest and disappear before anyone asks questions." He studied me with those pale eyes. "Why?" "Because my dog likes you," I said simply. "And because whatever you are, whoever's after you, you're still a patient who needs help." I handed him antibiotics and painkillers. "Take these, all of them. And if you're not gone by morning, we're going to have a very different conversation." He swallowed the pills dry. "Thank you, Dr. Cruz." "Don't thank me until you survive," I replied. "And don't bleed on my couch." Thor followed as I led Raphael toward the apartment door. I closed my bedroom door behind me, leaning against it as my knees finally went weak. My hands, steady through crisis, now trembled. I just sutured a gunshot wound with veterinary supplies, harbored someone clearly running from violence, and made myself an accessory to God knows what. Through the thin wall, I heard Raphael's low voice, urgent, speaking into a phone I hadn't seen him pull out. "Franco, it's me. They found me on Highway 26. There's a civilian involved. A veterinarian. She helped me. Do whatever you need to do to keep her safe." My heart pounded. Outside, wind moved through the pines. Inside, a stranger bled on my couch, And somewhere in the darkness, people with guns were looking for him. 7 hours to figure out what came next. 7 hours to decide if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, or somehow stumbled into saving it. The smell of coffee was the first thing that pulled me from a half-sleep that barely counted as rest. I hadn't needed an alarm. I'd spent most of the night listening, waiting for footsteps, the creak of the front door, the sound of a stranger leaving, but I heard nothing. Silence. Somehow worse than noise. When I finally checked my phone, it read 5:32 a.m. Camila would arrive in less than 30 minutes, expecting a normal Wednesday, expecting me to have the coffee ready, not a bleeding stranger recovering in my apartment. I threw on yesterday's jeans and a clean shirt, tied my hair back, and stepped out of my bedroom. Raphael was at the kitchen counter. Awake. Dressed in a clean t-shirt from my donation bin, one that clung to his broad shoulders, far too small for his frame. His injured arm hung carefully at his side, but he moved with a grace that didn't belong to someone shot 12 hours ago. "You should still be unconscious," I said, crossing my arms. He turned slightly, coffee pot in his good hand. "Couldn't sleep. Guilt or pain?" "Both," he admitted, pouring 2 mugs without asking. "I made extra. Figured you'd need it." The normalcy of it, the quiet domesticity, was absurd. A man I'd met under gunfire now making coffee in my kitchen as if he belonged there. I should have called the police. Should have demanded he leave. Instead, I took the mug he offered. Our fingers brushed. His skin was still warm, too warm. "You need to take more antibiotics," I said. "Already did. 3 a.m. And the pain meds? Skip them. Need to stay alert." He leaned against the counter, studying me with those pale eyes that never seemed to miss anything. "You didn't sleep either," he said. "Hard to sleep when there's a strange man bleeding on my couch." "I didn't bleed on it," he said. "You gave me very specific instructions." Almost humor flickered between us. It was dangerous, that tiny spark of ease. I couldn't afford to find him charming. Couldn't afford to notice the way his jaw tensed when he moved wrong, or how his hand tightened around the mug when footsteps sounded outside. "That's Camila," I said quickly, heart skipping. "My assistant. She gets here early to feed the overnight patients." Raphael's voice dropped low. "What are you going to tell her?" "The truth," I said, forcing calm I didn't feel. "That you're someone passing through who needed help. Nothing more." But before I could finish, I heard the click of keys in the front door. I hadn't reset the lock after bringing Raphael inside. Camila entered, humming, carrying her usual oversized bag, already talking about the weather, traffic, her boyfriend's latest drama. Then she saw him. "Val?" She froze mid-sentence, eyes wide. "You have a man here." "Cousin," I said immediately, forcing a casual tone. "From Brazil. Visiting unexpectedly. This is Raphael." Raphael added smoothly, extending his good hand. His accent thickened suddenly, Portuguese coloring every syllable. "Nice to meet. Valentina is always talking of you." My breath caught. He'd adapted instantly, played along without hesitation. I'd never told him about Camila, never mentioned Brazil, but he was convincing. Camila relaxed a little, though her eyebrows still arched high. "Your cousin is hot," she whispered, not quietly enough. Then louder. "What happened to your arm?" "Hiking accident," Raphael said before I could answer. "Very stupid. Valentina fixed me up in the middle of the night." "He showed up at midnight," I added quickly, glaring at him. Couldn't exactly turn him away bleeding. "But he's fine now." "He'll be gone before we open." "I will," Raphael said quietly, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Camila looked between us, clearly suspicious but too polite to push. "Okay. Well, I'll go check on the overnight boarding." That beagle probably ate his bedding again. As soon as she disappeared into the back, I turned to Raphael. Brazil? Cousin, I hissed. He set down his mug with a faint smirk. I gave you credibility. Before I could argue, the clinic's back door opened. I hadn't heard a car. A man stepped in, older, maybe 40, dark hair silvering at the temples. He moved with the same controlled precision as Raphael, his black suit immaculate despite the early hour. Boss? He said quietly. The word landed like a hammer between us. Raphael's expression changed instantly, hardening into authority. Franco, he said, voice low but sharp. I said discreet. Came through the service road. No one saw. Franco's eyes flicked to me, assessing, calculating. Dr. Cruz, he said. You know my name? I know everything relevant. He pulled out a phone, showed Raphael something on the screen. The two men spoke quickly in Italian. Urgent, clipped, impossible to follow. I caught maybe 3 words, and none of them comforting. English, I snapped. You're in my clinic. I deserve to know what's happening. Raphael looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like regret in his eyes. Last night wasn't random, he said quietly. It was an ambush. Organized. Professional. By who? Family variation, he said. We've been at war for 3 weeks. He said it like he was reading the weather. They killed 3 of my men. Would have killed me if I hadn't gotten lucky. The words hit harder than I expected. You're Mafia. He met my gaze without flinching. I'm a businessman with violent enemies. That's not a denial. No, Raphael said softly. It's not. I should have been terrified. Should have ordered them out, called the police, anything. Instead, fury burned through me. You brought this to my door. I had nowhere else to go. And now? What happens now? He didn't answer. Franco did. We have a bigger issue. Dr. Cruz needs to see this. He showed me a photo on his phone. A man's body. Face ruined. In his pocket, one of my business cards. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Where did you get this? One of the men from last night. Versani's crew, Franco said, swiping to another image. My clinic from the outside, photographed from a car. They know Raphael came here. They'll come looking. As if summoned, headlights swept across the front windows. A vehicle pulled up outside. A black SUV with tinted windows. Engine running. Raphael moved faster than someone injured should be able to. In an instant, he had me pressed behind the reception desk, his body shielding mine completely. Franco disappeared toward the back, hand inside his jacket. Stay quiet, Raphael whispered against my ear. Don't move. 2 men got out of the SUV. Through the blinds, I saw them approaching. One knocked, heavy, demanding. We're not open. I called out, proud, my voice barely trembled. We're looking for someone, one of them said. Thick accent. Eastern European. Man injured in accident last night. Heard there was clinic here. Raphael's hand found mine in the dark. His fingers laced through mine, squeezing once. Warning or reassurance, I couldn't tell. I smoothed my shirt, forced my face calm, and stepped into view. This is a veterinary clinic, I said through the door. I don't treat people. Maybe you make exception, the man replied, smiling without warmth. For friend. I don't have friends who get shot, I said coldly. Try the emergency room in Forest Grove. They're used to patching up idiots. The men exchanged glances. The shorter one pulled out his phone and held it up. Raphael. A photo, uninjured, elegant, wearing a tuxedo. You see this man? No, I lied smoothly. But if I do, should I be calling someone? If you see, you call this number. The man handed me a white business card with a single phone number printed on it. Important you call right away. Sure, I said, slipping the card into my pocket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual patients waiting. They stared a beat longer, then turned back to their SUV. The vehicle idled deliberately before pulling away, slowly letting me feel their eyes on the building. Only when the taillights disappeared did I exhale. My legs trembled. Raphael emerged from behind the desk. The tension in him was a living thing, violent, caged. They'll be back, he said. Then you need to leave. Now. Can't. He glanced toward Franco, who had reappeared. If I disappear, they'll assume you helped me. They'll come back to make you tell them where I went. So what are you suggesting? I demanded. That I harbor a fugitive indefinitely? 48 hours, Raphael said, voice low. You come with me. Let my people protect both locations. After that, Versani will have bigger problems than one doctor. I have a business, patience, a life. Franco's tone was calm but merciless. Dr. Cruz, with respect, your business card was found on a dead man. Whether you helped the boss or not, you're involved now. The unfairness of it hit like a physical blow. I'd done nothing wrong. Saved a life, and now I was caught in someone else's war. 2 days, Raphael said softly. 48 hours. Then I'll make sure they know you were never part of this. You'll be safe. And if I refuse? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The silence said everything. I looked around my clinic, the exam table, the sterile light, the life I'd built. Thor sat nearby, calm, eyes locked on Raphael like he'd already chosen sides. 48 hours, I said finally. Not 1 minute more. 3 black SUVs idled outside moments later. Franco loaded a duffel bag into one while I locked the clinic doors. Thor jumped into the back seat without hesitation. I told myself this was temporary. 2 days. Then everything would return to normal. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. 3 black SUVs waited behind my clinic, engines running low and steady. Franco loaded my hastily packed duffel bag into the middle car while I stood there trying to convince myself this was still temporary. Just 48 hours and I could go back to my life. Thor jumped into the back seat before I could stop him, circling once before settling like he'd planned this road trip all along. Raphael appeared beside me, his movements silent despite his size. He can stay here if you prefer. Franco's men will watch the clinic. He goes where I go, I said firmly, climbing in after my dog. Raphael followed and sat beside me, too close, his presence filling the space until the SUV felt smaller than my entire clinic. Franco took the driver's seat, 2 other vehicles falling into formation, one ahead, one behind. A convoy designed for protection, or imprisonment. I wasn't sure which. Where exactly are we going? I asked finally. My property. 2 hours north, Raphael said, his injured arm resting against his side. His tone was controlled, but I could hear the fatigue beneath it. Property, I repeated. You mean hideout? Cascade Mountains. Isolated. Defensible. Defensible? You mean like a fortress? I mean safe. He glanced at me, those ice-blue eyes catching faint morning light. For both of us. The road wound through thick forest. Franco drove in silence, headlights cutting through the fog. Outside, the wilderness deepened, towns vanishing, roads narrowing. Raphael made several calls in Italian, his voice low and even, though tension threaded every word. The foreign syllables rolled smoothly off his tongue, but the tone carried the sharpness of command. Whoever he was on those calls with, they obeyed. When he finally hung up, silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with all the things neither of us could say. Thor rested his head on my lap, grounding me when nothing else did. I stroked his fur absent-mindedly, feeling the weight of the last 24 hours settle in my chest. "Tell me about Veronique," I said finally. Raphael turned toward me, as if deciding how much truth I could handle. Then he sighed. "Sergio Veronique, 42, runs operations from Seattle to Sacramento, or he did until he decided Portland was worth starting a war over." "And you run Portland?" I said quietly. "My family has controlled this territory for 60 years, he replied. "Since my grandfather immigrated from Naples." He said it like a statement of lineage, not guilt, as if organized crime were simply a family business. "The Luminari family," he continued. "We have rules. Standards." "What kind of standards does the Mafia have?" I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. Something dark flickered across his face. "We don't traffic humans. We don't touch children. We don't deal heavy drugs or weapons to terrorists." My grandfather believed power came with responsibility. Not everyone in our world agrees. Veronique doesn't agree. "So he decided to take what's yours," I said slowly. Raphael nodded. "He allied himself with the Samskaya Bratva, the Russian organization with no code beyond profit. They want Portland because it's a clean port city, perfect for moving product and people. I refused to hand over territory, so they decided to take it." The words product and people made my stomach twist. Euphemisms for horrors I didn't want to picture. "How long have you been fighting?" I asked. 3 weeks since the first attack. But tensions have been building for months." He looked out the window at the passing trees. "I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. And the men who died? Good men," he said quietly. "Loyal. 2 had families." His voice flattened, stripped of emotion, but grief flickered beneath. "Franco is handling arrangements." I watched him for a long moment, the man I'd stitched back together, the same man who commanded others to kill. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "This life?" He was silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly, "I regret what it costs. But I was 12 when my mother died, cancer. My father had already abandoned us. My grandfather raised me, taught me everything. When he passed, I inherited responsibility for 200 families who depend on us. For work, for protection, for justice the law won't provide." "That's one way to frame it," I said. "It's the truth," Raphael replied, turning to face me fully. "Not all of it. But not a lie either." His gaze held mine, steady and unflinching. "I won't pretend I'm a good man, Valentina. But I'm not the worst one in this fight." The way he said my name, slow, deliberate, sent a ripple through my chest I didn't want to acknowledge. Dangerous. Human. Both. I forced my voice steady. "Tell me about your home." He gestured ahead. "You'll see soon." The landscape climbed higher into the Cascades. After nearly 2 hours, Franco turned onto an unmarked private road, hidden between pines. 10 minutes later, massive wrought iron gates appeared, flanked by stone pillars topped with security cameras. They opened silently as we approached. Beyond them, the world changed. The main house sat on a mountain plateau overlooking a sweeping valley. Glass and stone and clean modern lines blended with the wilderness around it. Security was everywhere but discreet. Men in dark suits positioned at intervals, sensors hidden among trees. "Welcome to my home," Raphael said quietly. We stopped in a circular drive paved with slate. The morning air was sharp with pine and cold. I stepped out, Thor bounding beside me, sniffing curiously. Then I saw her. A woman stood on the front steps, arms crossed, dark hair pulled into a severe ponytail. Late 20s, maybe 30. She wore tailored slacks and a silk blouse that screamed confidence and control. "Rafa," she said as he climbed out of the SUV. Her voice carried authority even at a whisper. "You brought a civilian here." "Lucia," Raphael greeted, embracing her briefly, carefully, mindful of his injury. "This is Dr. Valentina Cruz. She saved my life and now she's in danger because of it." Lucia's eyes swept over me, sharp and clinical. I'd seen that look in surgical residents deciding if you were competent or a liability. "The veterinarian," she said flatly. "You're aware of what my brother does?" "As of about 7 hours ago," I replied. For a heartbeat, something like respect flickered in her gaze. "At least you're honest. Come inside. We need to discuss security protocols." Inside, the house matched its exterior, modern, minimalist, elegant. Glass walls, stone floors, and furniture that was expensive but purposeful, not ostentatious. Lucia led us to a dining room where a long table was already set. "I assumed you'd be hungry," she said. "Chef prepared something simple." Simple turned out to be pasta carbonara that smelled like heaven. 2 men joined us, older, watchful, wearing dark suits and the air of seasoned soldiers. Raphael introduced them as Roberto and Adriano, captains in his organization. They nodded but didn't speak. Dinner was surreal, sitting across from Mafia leadership discussing security rotations and territory disputes, as if it were corporate strategy. Lucia was clearly more than his sister. She was his advisor, perhaps legal counsel, and definitely someone he trusted. Halfway through the meal, Lucia turned to me. "Dr. Cruz, can you shoot?" I nearly choked on my pasta. "What?" "A gun. Can you shoot one?" "I'm a veterinarian, not a mercenary." "That's not an answer." "No," I said flatly. "And I don't intend to learn in the next 48 hours. Lucia's cool gaze flicked to Raphael. He shrugged faintly. "She has spirit," he said. "Spirit won't stop Varani's men if they breach perimeter security," Lucia countered. "They won't get through," Raphael said, his voice carrying quiet authority. "I've doubled the guard. Installed new sensors. Anyone approaches, we'll know before they're within a mile." After dinner, Raphael led me upstairs to a guest suite that redefined the word room. It had a private sitting area, a bathroom larger than my entire apartment, and a bed that could have fit 4 people comfortably. "There are clothes in the closet," he said from the doorway. "Probably not your size exactly, but close. Lucia ordered them when Franco called ahead." "This is too much," I murmured. "It's what I have available." He leaned against the doorframe, but the motion made him wince. The adrenaline that had kept him moving all day was fading fast. Without thinking, I crossed to him. My fingers went instinctively to his shoulder, checking the bandage. "You're pushing too hard. The wound needs rest." "I'll rest when this is over." "You'll rest now," I said, guiding him to sit on the edge of the bed. Carefully, I peeled back the bandage. Some bleeding had seeped through. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make me frown. "Stay here. I'll get supplies." When I returned with gauze and antiseptic, he was still sitting there, waiting, trusting me completely that I cleaned and redressed the wound, my hands brushing warm skin. Up close, I noticed the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his pulse beat visibly in his throat. "Thank you," he said quietly. For everything. I know you didn't ask for any of this. No, I admitted. But I'm here now. Might as well see it through. Our eyes met and held, something unspoken sparking in the air between us. Something fragile, impossible, dangerous. Then Thor barked somewhere in the suite. Breaking the spell, Raphael stood, steadier than he should have been. Get some rest, he said softly. Tomorrow we plan how to end this. He was almost at the door when I called out, Raphael. He turned back. You can call me Valentina. You've bled on me. We're past formalities. For the first time, a genuine smile curved his lips, the kind that transformed his face entirely. Valentina, he said. Sleep well. When he left, I stood by the window overlooking the valley. Lights from the main house glimmered against the glass. Beyond them stretched miles of darkness. I was in a Mafia boss's home, under guard, hiding from men who wanted me dead for helping someone I barely knew. 48 hours. He'd promised, but deep down I already knew. Nothing about this would end in 2 days. The following morning broke with a pale gray light filtering through the mountain fog. For the first time in 24 hours, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt watchful. I woke to the faint sound of voices outside my suite. Men moving down the hall, giving status updates in short military tones. When I opened the door, a young woman in a black blazer immediately straightened. Good morning, Dr. Cruz. Miss Lucia asked me to bring you breakfast. She entered with a tray, coffee, fruit, scrambled eggs that looked almost too perfect. If you need anything, press the call button near the bed. A call button? I wasn't sure whether to laugh or be unnerved. Thank you, I said quietly. The woman left, closing the door behind her. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the untouched food. The mountain mist rolled past the windows, erasing the view of the valley below. A knock came. Not hesitant. Measured. When I opened the door, Raphael stood there, shaved, dressed in a dark sweater and slacks, the faintest trace of fatigue beneath his composure. His shoulder was bandaged neatly, and though he still favored it, the injury hadn't dimmed his presence. Good morning, he said, voice low, carrying more warmth than I expected. Lucia thought you might like a tour. A tour, I echoed. To help you feel less trapped. The honesty disarmed me. How considerate of your security prison. He almost smiled. It's not a prison, Valentina. Really? Then where are the keys? He didn't answer, just gestured for me to follow. We descended to the main floor, Thor trotting happily beside us. The house was even larger than I'd realized. An open expanse of stone, wood, and glass that merged seamlessly with the landscape. Every wall seemed to frame the forest like a painting. This place, I said softly, doesn't fit the image of a mafia boss. I'm not a caricature, Raphael replied. My grandfather built this house as a refuge, away from the business. And yet the business followed you here. He gave a quiet laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. It always does. We stepped outside through wide glass doors that opened to a terrace overlooking the valley. Pines stretched endlessly below us. I could see the faint shimmer of a river winding through the distance. You chose a beautiful place to hide, I said. I didn't choose it for hiding, he corrected. I chose it to remember why I fight. He rested his hand lightly on the railing, eyes distant. My grandfather used to say, power is worthless if you can't protect something you love. For him it was family. For me. He looked at me then, something unguarded in his gaze. It's complicated. I turned away before the silence between us could turn into something else. You should sit down. That shoulder still looks stiff. Doctor's orders? Veterinarian's orders. Disobey at your own risk. He obeyed, sitting at the terrace table while I checked the bandage. It was clean. No infection. You heal fast, I said. Occupational necessity, he murmured. Meaning I can't afford to stay down when people are waiting for my decisions. He watched me work, his eyes following the motion of my hands. Do you always do that? What? Focus so completely you forget the world exists. It's part of the job, I said, though my pulse betrayed me. You remind me of my sister, he said quietly. Lucia hides behind logic too. It's easier than feeling everything. I met his gaze. You think you've figured me out already? No, he said softly. But I'd like to. Something in his tone, earnest, uncalculated, made me look away. Don't. I'm not part of your world. You were part of it the moment you opened your door last night. The reminder landed between us like a warning bell. Before I could respond, Lucia appeared at the terrace entrance, her calm expression betraying nothing. Rafa, you're needed in the control room. Franco says there's been movement near the southern approach. Raphael stood immediately. Excuse me, Valentina. Lucia waited until he was gone, then turned to me. You're not safe here, you know. Funny, he said the opposite. My brother means well, Lucia said evenly. But protection from him often means exposure to everything that surrounds him. This life, it consumes people. Even those who think they can stay on the edges. I didn't choose to be here, I said. No one ever does, Lucia replied. That's the lie we tell ourselves before the first line is crossed. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Later that afternoon, I wandered the property, Thor trotting alongside me. The air smelled of pine and rain-soaked earth. Men with earpieces patrolled discreetly, pretending not to notice me. When I reached the greenhouse behind the main house, I stopped. Inside, Raphael was tending to a cluster of white orchids, his movements slow and deliberate. I didn't peg you for a gardener, I said through the open door. My grandmother loved these, he replied, not turning around. She said they reminded her that beauty and fragility often share the same stem. They're beautiful, I admitted, stepping closer. You take good care of them. Care is easy when something can't lie to you, he said, finally meeting my eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was charged, alive with all the questions we weren't asking. I don't belong here, I said quietly. Maybe not, Raphael replied. But maybe you belong with someone who does. Is that your attempt at persuasion? No, he said, voice soft. It's a confession. Before I could answer, a burst of static sounded from his earpiece. He pressed a hand to it, listening. His expression hardened instantly. Franco found a surveillance drone in the forest, he said. Russian tech. So they did find us. He nodded. But not close. We have time. Time for what? For you to eat dinner before Lucia kills me for letting you starve, he said with a faint smile. Come. That evening we dined again at the long table, Lucia, Franco, 2 guards, Raphael and me. Conversation circled around security reports and coded phrases I didn't understand. Every so often, I caught Raphael's eyes on me. His expression unreadable. When dinner ended, he walked me back to my suite. We stopped outside the door, the quiet stretching between us. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be longer. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we end this. And if you don't? Then I'll find another way. He reached for my hand but stopped short, as if realizing the line between gratitude and something else. Good night, Valentina. Good night, Raphael. He turned to leave, but before he disappeared down the hall, I heard him murmur something under his breath. Too soft to catch fully. It sounded like forgive me. I lay awake for hours, listening to the mountain wind whistle through the eaves, wondering if I'd just witnessed the quiet side of a man the world called a monster, and against all logic, all reason, part of me wanted to believe there was more to him than the blood that followed wherever he went. Morning came soft and gold through the wide glass windows of the mountain estate. For a fleeting moment I forgot everything, the guns, the threats, the blood. The air smelled like pine and strong coffee, and somewhere down the hall I could hear the low, warm sound of Raphael's voice. Thor stirred at the foot of the bed, tail thumping once before curling back into his dreams. I showered, changed into one of the simple blouses Lucia had left for me, and tried to convince myself that today would be the end of all this. When I came downstairs, Raphael was in the kitchen, dressed casually, one sleeve rolled carefully above his injured arm, cooking like he'd done it his whole life. "You cook?" I asked, surprised. He looked over his shoulder, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "When I have a reason." He plated eggs, bread, and black coffee, pushing one plate toward me. "Lucia thinks I live on espresso and chaos. She's not entirely wrong." "You're full of contradictions," I said, sitting across from him. "That's what happens when you grow up between two worlds." His tone softened as he spoke, about his grandmother who'd taught him to cook, about growing up in Naples, about learning responsibility too young. He told me stories that didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded like truths, small, quiet truths from a man who lived surrounded by lies. "You ever think of leaving it all behind?" I asked. He hesitated, his gaze steady on mine. "Every day." "And why don't you?" "Because people would die if I did." The way he said it, flat, resigned, made something twist in my chest. This man wasn't romanticizing violence. He was bound to it. When breakfast ended, Lucia appeared with her tablet in hand, businesslike as ever. "Rafa, the accountants need you. Also, we have to discuss shipment routes. The Bratva might have compromised the southern line." "I'll handle it after noon," Raphael said, not looking away from me. "Valentina, you're free to walk the grounds. Stay within the perimeter." Franco doubled the guards after last night. "Still pretending this isn't a prison?" I asked. "It's a gilded cage," he said quietly. "But at least it's temporary." He meant it to comfort me. Somehow it didn't. By midday, I found myself in the library. A cathedral of wood and leather, sunlight falling in golden stripes across rows of books. I ran my fingers along the spines, pausing at old titles in Italian and Latin. "You like to read?" Raphael's voice came from behind me. "I used to," I said, turning. "Before life got too busy saving animals." He smiled faintly. "Then let's call this your forced vacation. That's one word for kidnapping." He chuckled, stepping closer. The air between us shifted, charged and careful. "You could have left yesterday," he said. "Franco would have driven you to town if you'd insisted. But you didn't. I stayed because you said it wasn't safe." He tilted his head, studying me. "Is that the only reason?" I wanted to say yes. I should have. But the truth trembled somewhere between fear and curiosity. He reached out, brushing his fingers against my wrist, a touch light enough to deny, but electric enough to shatter the silence. "Raphael," I warned softly. He didn't move away. "You make me forget I'm supposed to be careful." "Then maybe you shouldn't be near me," I said. "Maybe not," he agreed. "But I don't want to stop." Before I could reply, his phone buzzed on the table beside us. He picked it up, listening silently, his face darkening. Franco, not now. A pause. Handle it. He hung up, shoulders tense. What is it? Business, he said shortly, then softened. Nothing for you to worry about. But the tone was wrong. Too quick. Too defensive. Don't lie to me, I said. I'm protecting you. I don't need protection from the truth. He stared at me a long time, then exhaled. Veroni hit one of our warehouses last night. Killed 2 men. Took equipment and information. They're trying to find where I'm hiding. And now they'll come here, I said, cold realization sinking in. He shook his head. No one can find this place. I made sure of it. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, until I caught the flicker of guilt that passed through his eyes. It was quick. So quick I might have missed it, but it was there. What aren't you telling me? He didn't answer. The silence stretched until it hurt. I turned away, pretending to study the books again, my heart pounding. You should rest. You're still recovering. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Valentina, don't, I said sharply. Don't make this worse. That evening I sat in the garden with Thor, trying to think. The sun had sunk behind the peaks, turning the sky copper and violet. Everything was too quiet. Footsteps approached softly on the stone path. Lucia. She didn't sit, just stood near the edge of the terrace, arms crossed. You should know something, she said, her tone clinical. Last night, when my brother was ambushed, he wasn't supposed to be on that road. What do you mean? He went there because someone told him there was information about Veroni's next move. But it was a setup. The information came from a source that knew you'd be on call at your clinic that night. My breath caught. Are you saying they used me? Lucia's expression didn't change. I'm saying whoever sent that lead knew exactly what would happen. My brother doesn't like coincidences. Neither do I. I stood slowly. You think I think, she said carefully, that Raphael sometimes lets his instincts override his judgment. If you want to know the truth, ask him. She left before I could speak. My mind reeled. I went inside, moving fast through the hallways until I reached his study. The door was slightly ajar. Voices inside, Raphael and Franco. She's starting to ask questions, Franco was saying. You should tell her. Not yet, Raphael replied, his voice low but clear. If she knows the full truth, she'll hate me before this is over. She has a right to know you used her as bait. The world tilted. The words hit like a physical blow that I pushed the door open. Both men froze. Say that again, I said, my voice trembling. Go ahead. Say it in front of me. Raphael's face went still, but Franco looked almost relieved. She knows, he said simply, and left the room, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Valentina, you used me, I said, the words shaking out of me. You knew they'd track you to my clinic. His jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to go that far. You planned it, I spat. You made me part of your war. You God. I stitched your wound with veterinary tools while you let me think I was saving a stranger. I was a stranger, he said quietly. But I couldn't risk telling you everything. You could have told me the truth before dragging me here. He moved toward me, but I stepped back. You don't understand, he said. If they'd killed me, they would have come for you anyway. I made sure you were under protection. Protection? I laughed bitterly. You call this protection? You destroyed my life. Valentina. Don't say my name like that, I snapped. You don't get to use it. He looked at me, eyes full of something raw, guilt maybe, or something worse. I never wanted to hurt you. Then you shouldn't have lied. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. I turned away, hands trembling. You need to rest, he said softly. I need to get out. You can't. Not yet. Watch me. I shoved past him and left the study, ignoring his voice calling after me. Back in my suite, I locked the door. Thor paced nervously, whining low in his throat. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady my breathing, but tears burned hot behind my eyes. Somewhere downstairs, I heard raised voices, Raphael shouting orders, Franco answering. Then the deep growl of engines as more SUVs arrived. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I could ever forgive him, but one thing was certain. The man I'd started to trust, the man I might have loved, had built that trust on a lie, and the war outside these mountains was nothing compared to the one now raging inside my heart. The night after the confrontation, the mountain air felt colder than usual. I hadn't spoken to Raphael since storming out of his study. Sleep came only in fragments, half-dreams filled with sirens, gunfire, and his voice sang my name like an apology. When dawn broke, I decided I couldn't stay another hour. I packed quietly, stuffing a few clothes into my duffel and tucking my phone and wallet inside. Thor lifted his head from the rug, ears flicking as if to ask what I was doing. Going home, I whispered. Before anyone can stop us. I just zipped the bag when a knock came. Valentina? Lucia's voice. Calm, composed. Breakfast is ready. I'm not hungry. You should eat before you travel. My heart stopped. Before I what? Lucia paused, and for the first time her tone softened. Rafa's men will escort you to Portland within the hour. He wants you safe. Safe. From him or his enemies, I wasn't sure anymore. When I stepped into the hallway, Raphael was waiting near the stairs. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His tie hung loose, his bandage visible beneath his open collar. I'm sending you home, he said quietly. That I wanted to scream, to tell him he didn't get to decide that. But all that came out was, it's about time. He nodded. Franco will take you. 2 cars heavily armed. Once you're home, my people will remain close, discreetly. Just until this is over. I don't want your guards. You don't have a choice. Our eyes met for a long, charged moment. Whatever trust or tenderness had lived between us was gone, replaced by something jagged and aching. Then I turned away. Goodbye, Raphael. He didn't answer. The convoy wound down the forest road in silence. I sat in the back seat beside Thor, staring out the window as mist curled around the trees. Franco drove. 2 men with rifles rode behind us. For 20 minutes everything was still, too still. Then from the radio static. A burst of sharp Italian. Boss, this is Unit 2 movement on the East Trail. The transmission cut off with a sound like thunder. Franco's hands tightened on the wheel. Hold on. Before I could ask, the road exploded ahead of us. Flames, dirt, and splintered asphalt raining down. The SUV spun sideways, slamming into a tree. Thor barked wildly as the windshield cracked in a spiderweb of glass. Out! Franco shouted, throwing open the door and pulling his gun. Move, doctor. I stumbled out, coughing, the forest spinning around me. Gunfire erupted, sharp, echoing off the rocks. Shadows moved between the trees, voices shouting in Russian. Down! Franco shoved me behind the SUV. Stay quiet. Bullets shredded the side mirror. One of our guards dropped, screaming. Franco fired back 3 clean shots, then ducked. Who are they? I gasped. Bratva, he said grimly. They found us. How? But before he could answer, a black van screeched onto the road, blocking the path. 4 men jumped out, masked, armed. One of them shouted in Russian, and Franco's eyes widened. "Adriano," he muttered. I blinked. "Adriano? Your man from dinner." Franco's jaw clenched. "Not anymore." The traitor strode forward, pulling off his mask. His expression was cold, triumphant. "Dr. Cruz," he said in accented English, "you've caused a lot of trouble." "Let her go, Adriano," Franco warned, raising his gun. Adriano smiled. "You think I want her dead? No. She's leverage." Before Franco could fire, 2 more men appeared behind us. One slammed the butt of his rifle into Franco's head. He went down hard. Thor lunged at Adriano, teeth bared, but one of the Russians kicked him aside. I screamed, lunging for my dog, but a hand clamped over my mouth, the metallic taste of fear flooding my tongue. "Easy," Adriano murmured, catching my chin. "You're worth more alive." They dragged me toward the van. I struggled, kicked, bit, but the men were too strong. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut was Franco's motionless body and smoke curling from the wrecked SUVs. When consciousness returned, it was dark. My wrists were bound, my head pounding. I was in a warehouse, concrete walls, the smell of oil and rust thick in the air. Adriano sat nearby, smoking a cigarette. "You wake fast," he said. "Good. I hate wasting time." "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. "Raphael cost me everything," he said calmly. "He took my loyalty for granted. Now he'll trade his life for yours." "He won't." Adriano laughed. "Oh, he will. The great Luminari king with a soft spot for a veterinarian? You think I don't see how he looks at you?" I refused to answer. Though my heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it, he flicked his cigarette aside. "Don't worry. I won't hurt you, unless he makes me." I tested the ropes. Too tight. But a small metal shard near my boot caught my eye. A broken piece of something sharp. If I could just reach it. Adriano turned away to make a call, his voice echoing in Italian. I stretched, inch by inch, the shard biting into my fingertips. Slowly, painfully, I began sawing at the ropes. Minutes passed. Then outside, engines roared, multiple vehicles. Headlights sliced through cracks in the wall. Adriano frowned. "Too soon," he muttered, pulling his gun. Then the world exploded. The warehouse doors burst open in a storm of light and bullets. Raphael's men flooded in, shouting in Italian and English. Muzzle flashes lit the shadows. Adriano fired back, dragging me toward the back entrance. "Move!" he snarled, but I was ready. My wrists were free. I swung the metal shard up and slashed across his arm. He cursed, dropping the gun. I ran. "Valentina!" Raphael's voice cut through the chaos. I turned toward it, heart racing. He was there, black tactical gear, face streaked with blood and fury. He saw me and didn't hesitate. "Get down!" Gunfire erupted again. I dropped to the floor as Raphael's men overwhelmed Adriano's crew. Adriano lunged for a fallen weapon, but Raphael reached him first, 2 shots center mass. The traitor fell without a sound. Raphael crossed the floor to me, kneeling. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, tears spilling before I could stop them. "You came." "Of course I came," he said. "You think I'd let anyone take you from me?" Before I could speak, a blast rocked the building. Fire roared up from the corner where ammunition had caught. Flames licked the walls, thick smoke filling the air. "We have to go," Franco shouted from the doorway, bandaged and alive after all. Raphael grabbed my hand. "Stay close." We ran through the smoke, coughing, dodging falling debris. The fire grew faster than we could move. At one point, a beam crashed down, blocking our path. Back way, Raphael coughed, dragging me toward a side corridor. The heat was unbearable, the air thick and choking. Thor's bark echoed faintly outside, guiding us. We burst through a metal door into the cold night air just as the warehouse collapsed behind us in a shower of sparks and flame that I fell to my knees on the gravel, gasping for air. Thor bounded up, licking my face frantically. Raphael knelt beside me, coughing, soot streaking his face. Blood stained his sleeve where his stitches had torn open again. "You're bleeding," I said. "So are you," he countered, brushing a soot mark from my cheek. "But we're alive." Behind us, the warehouse burned against the night sky, smoke rising like a dark signal into the stars. Franco's men fanned out, securing the area. I looked at Raphael, at the man who had lied, betrayed, and still risked everything to save me. "Why?" I whispered. "After everything I said, why would you come?" He looked at me, eyes raw and unguarded. "Because I'd rather die than lose you again." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and the mountain wind carried the scent of smoke and ash and something like redemption that I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his. "I hate that you make me care," I whispered. That he smiled faintly, breathless. "Then we're even." We stayed there until dawn, watching the last of the flames die out, two people bound together by fire, blood, and choices neither could take back. When morning came, it brought silence, the kind that follows chaos, heavy and unreal. That we were safe, or so Franco said. The rescue team had moved us to a private medical facility hidden deep in the mountains, a place that smelled of antiseptic and clean linen. Outside, snow fell quietly, as if the world itself wanted to erase what had happened. I lay on a narrow cot, the light above me too white, too still. My wrists were raw, my lungs still sore from the smoke, but I was alive. Thor slept at the foot of the bed, his body curled protectively against my legs across the room. Raphael sat on another cot, his shoulder freshly stitched, bandaged again. His face was pale, lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady, watching me, always watching. The doctor finished adjusting my fore and nodded toward him. "He refused to be treated in a separate room," she said. "Said he wouldn't let you out of his sight." I wanted to tell her that was typical Raphael, commanding, relentless, impossible. But my throat tightened. Because under all that stubbornness, there was something else now. Fear. When she left, the room went quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. Raphael leaned back against the headboard, exhaling. "How's your breathing?" "I'll live," I said. "You? I've had worse." He managed a small, tired smile. I studied him for a long moment, then whispered, "You risked everything." He didn't deny it. "Vergiani's dead," he said softly. "Lucia led the strike while I was gone. The Bratva's retreating. It's over." "Over," I repeated. The word felt strange. "So all that blood, all those bodies, all of it ends just like that?" "It never ends," he said. "Not really. But the worst part, the war, that's finished." I looked down at my hands. They still trembled faintly. "I read the messages on Franco's phone," I said finally. "You used me as bait. From the beginning." Raphael closed his eyes. "I know. I need you to tell me the truth," I said, voice shaking. "Did you ever mean any of it? The things you said, the way you looked at me?" His eyes opened, and for the first time since I'd met him, there was no mask, no composure, just truth. "It started as strategy," he said quietly. "Franco suggested using you to draw Verani out, to make him think you were my weakness. And I let him." But somewhere between your clinic and the moment you stood between me and armed men, it stopped being strategy. Before or after you slept with me? He winced. Before I knew I was already gone. I swallowed hard. And what does that make me, Raphael? You're collateral damage. No, he said fiercely. You're the only thing that makes me want to be better. I turned away, blinking against the sting in my eyes. That's not love, Raphael. That's guilt dressed up as redemption. Maybe it started that way, he said. But it isn't now. He pushed himself off the cot, wincing with pain, and crossed to me. When I didn't pull back, he dropped to one knee beside my bed. I called off the operation the morning before you found those messages, he said. Told Franco to abort. But it was too late. They already knew about you. You could have told me. I was trying to protect you. By lying. By keeping you alive. My voice broke. I didn't ask for that. I asked for honesty. He closed his eyes, his jaw tight. You're right. You did. And I failed you. Silence stretched between us again. Outside, the snow fell heavier, muffling the world. Finally, I whispered, So what now? He looked up at me then, eyes raw. Now I give you a choice. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Legal documents thick with embossed seals. New identity, relocation funds, a house wherever you want it. You can disappear. Live your life the way you planned before I ever bled on your floor. I stared at the papers, my breath catching. And if I stay? He hesitated. Then I spend however long you'll let me proving that what you felt, what we are, was real. That I'm not the man who used you. Not anymore. I shook my head slowly. You can't just erase what happened. I know, he said. But I can make sure you never pay the price for it again. For a moment I didn't answer. I just looked at him. At the bandages on his arm, the bruise forming along his jaw, the exhaustion in his shoulders. A man who had burned his empire to save me. And I realized something terrifying. I still loved him. Thor was right about you, I said quietly. He frowned. The dog. I nodded. He knew from the beginning you weren't a threat. Raphael's smile was faint, almost disbelieving. Smart dog. Terrible judge of character, apparently. Maybe not. We sat in silence a while longer. The machines hummed, steady and rhythmic, like the slow return of heartbeat after trauma. Finally I said, I have conditions. His gaze sharpened. Name them. No more lies. No more strategy without my consent. I'm your partner or I'm gone. Agreed. I keep my clinic. My life. You don't get to own me. I never wanted to, he said. I want you exactly as you are. And when, if we ever have children, I added, surprising myself, they don't inherit this. They get choice. Real choice. For a moment his breath caught. Then he nodded slowly. Lucia's ready to take over operations. 5 years, maybe less, and I'll step back. We'll build something else. Something clean. You'd really do that? I'd do anything for you. The simplicity of it, the lack of pretense, hit harder than any grand declaration. He reached for my hand. But you need to understand what staying means. There will always be danger. There will always be enemies. I know, I said softly. But I also know that I'm tired of running. For the first time since I'd met him, Raphael smiled. Not the calculated kind, not the one meant to charm or command, but something real. He lifted my hand to his lips. Then stay. I didn't answer with words. I leaned forward and kissed him, slowly, carefully, tasting salt and blood and the sharp edge of survival. When we broke apart, He rested his forehead against mine. No regrets, he whispered. Not even one. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet, relentless, cleansing. Inside, the man who had once been my captor held my hand like a promise, and for the first time, I believed in the possibility of something fragile and new. 2 weeks passed since the fire and blood. 14 days since Raphael Luminari tore through a burning warehouse to save me, and since I chose to stay. The clinic felt smaller now, or maybe I'd just gotten used to open mountain skies and the quiet hum of security that came with his world. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. Checkups, stitches, vaccinations. Normalcy, fragile but real. Camila noticed first. "You're different," she said one afternoon as we cleaned up after our last appointment. "Whatever happened while you were gone? It changed you." I set down my stethoscope and met her eyes. I fell in love with someone complicated, someone dangerous, and I'm still figuring out whether that makes me brave or stupid. "Can it be both?" she said, half smiling. "Maybe." Gabby dropped by with sandwiches later, full of questions I couldn't answer. She kept glancing at the guards who still lingered near the entrance, pretending to be customers. My answer stayed vague, safer that way. Then, 20 minutes before closing, a black sedan pulled into the gravel lot. Sleek. Understated. Not one of his convoys. My pulse quickened. When the door opened and Raphael stepped out, the rest of the world blurred. He wore dark jeans, a leather jacket, and a simple gray shirt, casual by his standards, yet he still moved like a man who owned every inch of ground beneath him. Camila froze mid-sentence. "Holy hell, Val. That's the cousin?" "That's Raphael," I said quietly. "And no, he's not my cousin." "Wow. You could have led with that." He entered the clinic with his usual quiet confidence, and Thor bounded over immediately, tail wagging like they were lifelong friends. Raphael knelt, scratched behind the dog's ears, then looked up at me. "Can we talk?" he asked. Camila disappeared into the back room with the speed of someone who valued her life. Raphael waited until we were alone, then reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the counter between us. "Legal documents," he said. "Your name on every page. The clinic is yours, free and clear. I paid off the mortgage this morning." I blinked, speechless. He added a second document. "And this is a trust fund, 500,000, managed by an independent firm. No strings attached." My throat tightened. "Raphael, let me finish." His voice was steady but soft. "You need to be able to choose freely. Stay with me because you want to, not because you're trapped or dependent. So these are yours, whether you decide to stay or go." I picked up the papers with trembling hands. The weight of freedom was heavier than I expected. "Why?" I whispered. He stepped closer, stopping just short of touching me. "Because you deserve choice. Real choice." His eyes held mine, raw and unguarded. "Because I love you, Valentina. Not the idea of you, not what you represent, you. The stubborn veterinarian who sutures bullet wounds, yells at crime lords, and makes terrible coffee." A half laugh, half sob escaped me. "My coffee isn't that bad. It's awful," he said with a faint smile. "But I'd drink it every morning for the rest of my life if you'd let me." I set down the papers and stepped into his space. His arms came around me instantly, strong and steady. "Safe home," I whispered against his shoulder. He chuckled softly. "You have conditions, don't you?" "Of course." He tilted his head. "Name them. No more secrets. If there's danger, you tell me. If there's strategy, you include me. Partnership or nothing. Done. I keep my clinic. My life. I'm not abandoning everything I built. Never wanted you to, he said. I want you exactly as you are. And when we have kids, I continued, surprising myself, they get normal. School plays, soccer games, a boring suburban life. No legacy, no empire, no choosing between family and law. He smiled then, that real disarming smile that always made my chest ache. I'm transitioning everything to Lucia over the next 4 years. By the time we're ready for children, I'll be retired from operations. You'd really do that? We'll be boring together. I laughed softly. You could never be boring. Watch me try, he said, leaning his forehead against mine. So what's your answer? Instead of replying, I kissed him, slow, deliberate, full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, I whispered, I choose you. Eyes wide open. No illusions. No regrets. He smiled. Ask me again in 50 years. Deal. 6 months later, I stood in Raphael's dining room, watching chaos unfold around a long table filled with food and laughter. Lucia argued politics with Roberto while Franco carefully avoided taking sides. Gabby was there too, charming everyone with her irreverent humor. Thor slept beneath the table, earning scraps from Raphael every time he thought I wasn't looking. You're staring, Raphael murmured, arms sliding around my waist from behind. I'm appreciating, I corrected. There's a difference. Appreciating what? This. You. The fact that we made it here. He turned me to face him. It's not perfect. It's real, I said. That's better. Lucia raised her wine glass. If you two are done whispering, the floor is yours, brother. Raphael cleared his throat, one arm still around me. Everyone, he said. Valentina and I have an announcement. I lifted my hand, showing the ring. A simple platinum band with a single diamond. Elegant. Unpretentious. Lucia squealed. Actually squealed. Franco smiled, the rare genuine kind that reached his eyes. Gabby's eyes shimmered with tears. Took you long enough, Lucia teased, hugging me tight. I've had the date circled in my calendar for months. Presumptuous much? I laughed. Informed, she said with a wink. There's a difference. Then her expression softened. You sure about this? Completely, I said. And I meant it. Because I knew exactly what I was choosing, the danger that might never disappear, the complexity, the moral gray. But I was also choosing the man who'd once covered my body with his own to take bullets. The man who'd offered me freedom when he could have demanded loyalty. The man who'd learned how to make eggs and peace in the same kitchen. That night, after the guests had gone and the house had gone quiet, Raphael found me on the terrace overlooking the valley, the same place where months ago we'd had dinner before everything changed. Cold? He asked, draping his jacket over my shoulders. A little, I admitted. We stood together, the mountains glowing under moonlight. Thank you, I said softly. For what? For giving me choice. For letting me stay instead of keeping me. He kissed the top of my head. Though I'll admit, he murmured, I was terrified you'd choose to leave. Never crossed my mind, I said. Well, maybe once. For about 5 minutes. But Thor wouldn't have forgiven me. Just Thor. I looked up, meeting his gaze. I wouldn't have forgiven myself. He smiled, that quiet, dangerous, impossibly gentle smile that undid me every time. You're it for me, Valentina Cruz, he said. The complicated, stubborn, surprisingly domestic love of my life. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Then you've been spending time with the wrong people. Not anymore. He kissed me, slow and deep, tasting like wine, promise, and everything we'd survived. "Ready for bed," he murmured. "In a minute," I whispered. "I want to stay here a bit longer." So we stood there, wrapped in each other, while the stars bloomed across the Oregon sky. "Valentina," he said softly, his breath warm against my hair. "Thank you for opening your door that night. For choosing to save a bleeding stranger instead of the safer option." I thought back to that storm, to the pounding on the clinic door, to the man who'd stumbled inside covered in blood and secrets. "You're welcome," I said. Then after a pause, "And Raphael?" "Yes. Thank you for being worth saving." We stayed there, silent, the wind whispering through the pines. And I realized this was it. Not a fairy tale ending, but something far more precious. A beginning. Messy, dangerous, utterly real. Some stories start with once upon a time. Ours began with blood and thunder, and a woman foolish enough to open her door to danger. Maybe that made it better. Maybe that made it earned. Either way, I wouldn't change a single moment. Which moment in this story made your heartacre believe in love again? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more passionate, emotional stories from Desire Tales.